Hey, this is Encouragement. Bite-sized stories to refresh your soul. Here's Jim Smith with a little encouragement.
At a church one Sunday, the pastor stood up, he walked over to the pulpit, and before he gave his sermon, he introduced a guest minister. The pastor told the congregation that the guest minister was a dear friend from childhood, and that he wanted him to have a few minutes to greet the church and share whatever he felt would be appropriate for the service. So with that, the guest minister, an elderly man, stepped up to the pulpit and began to tell a story. A father, his son, and a friend of his son were sailing off the Pacific coast when a fast-approaching storm blocked any attempt to get back to shore. The waves were soon so high that even though the father was an experienced sailor, he couldn't keep the boat upright, and the three of them were swept into the ocean as the boat capsized. The old man hesitated for a moment as he told his story, making eye contact with two teenagers who were, for the first time since the service began, looking somewhat interested in the story. And the elderly minister continued with his story. Grabbing a rescue line, the father had to make the most excruciating decision of his life. Which of the two boys would he throw the other end of the lifeline to? He only had seconds to make the decision, and the father knew that his son was a Christian, and he also knew that his son's friend was not. The agony of his decision was far greater than the strength of the huge waves, and as the father yelled out, "I love you, son," he threw the lifeline to the son's friend. By the time the father had pulled the friend back to the capsized boat, the son had disappeared beneath the waves into the black of night. His body was never recovered. By this time, in the church that Sunday, the two teenagers were sitting up straight, paying attention, anxiously waiting for the next words to come out of the elderly minister's mouth, and he continued. The father knew his son would step into eternity with Jesus, and he couldn't bear the thought of his son's friend stepping into eternity without Jesus. So he had sacrificed his son to save the son's friend. And the old minister added, "How great is the love of God that he could do the same for us." With that, the old man turned and sat back down in his chair, and the room grew silent. The pastor of the church again walked to the pulpit and delivered a brief sermon. Within minutes after the service, the two teenagers were at the old man's side, and one of the boys said, "That was a nice story, but I don't think it was very realistic for a father to give up his only son's life in hopes that the other boy would become a Christian." The old man thought and said, "Well, you've got a point there." And suddenly sorrow began to overtake the old man's face. He said, "I guess maybe it isn't very realistic, is it? But I'm here today to tell you that I understand more than most the pain that God must have felt to give up his only son. You see, I'm the man who lost his son to the ocean that day. And my son's friend that I chose to save is that man over there, your pastor."
Thank you for listening to Encouragement. If you've been refreshed, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share a little encouragement with someone you love. Encouragement is a podcast from Family Radio. These stories are just a taste of the stories you can hear every day. Listen at familyradio.org or find more encouragement on the Family Radio app.